Jason, as it is every single week, today's episode of Lee's Summit Town Hall is brought to you by Budget Blinds of Lee's Summit.
Budget Blinds!
We say it every week, Jason. These are good folks providing good service for Lee's Summit and the area surrounding. Jason, I'm going to talk about one thing and one thing only with Budget Blinds this time.
What is it?
Automation.
Automation. It's the future. The robots are coming for us all. Die!
Well, look, it's not a reason to be scared. You should embrace the future, embrace the automation, embrace the fact.
All hail my new robot overlord.
Yes, and embrace the fact that you can sit in your comfiest chair and either at the push of a button or the use of your voice control your window treatments and virtually everything else in your home.
That sounds a lot better than a lifetime of indentured slavery to the robot overlords.
Well, you know, I'm a new owner of the Alexa device, so she might be taking over.
That's fine. Well, if you can get Alexa to open and close your shades.
I can. Alexa can open and close the shades. Alexa can turn on and turn off my lights. And all of this stuff can be set up if you go visit the fine folk at Budget Blinds of Lee's Summit. Where do you find them, Jason?
I believe they are in downtown Lee's Summit.
They are right on Main Street in the heart of Lee's Summit. Go visit them. Tell them Jason Nick sent you. Big news, Jason. Chili Fest is coming.
It is.
Chili.
Let's be clear. Chili Fest is coming back.
Chili Fest returns to Lee's Summit October 5th at Bridge Space in downtown Lee's Summit. Proceeds are benefiting Coldwater of Lee's Summit.
Look, I know you people. All of you. I mean, like the 9 who listen to our show. I know who you are.
One of those is your mother.
We know. No, it's actually not my mother. They download it. I don't think they actually listen.
She stopped listening?
Yeah, I don't think she does. Anyway, everybody loves chili. Even my mom, actually. She loves some chili. And this is your chance to make chili, to bring it, and to show people how good your chili is. Because everybody really thinks, well, my chili's better than your chili. Like, I have great chili.
You know what? They're wrong, though, because my chili's better than
That's
chili.
what I'm saying. And other than your chili, other than my chili, your chili is the best. It's fine. So there are 4 categories of things to cook and show off this year.
Yeah, you don't have to just show off your chili.
No, you can show off your wings. You can show off your salsa. You can do the home-style chili, which is, I think, Nick and I's area of expertise, and then the Kasi chili. So Nick and I are going to be on a team this year. It's Team Link to Lee's Summit. We're going to go in and we're going to do that, and I think he and I are going to try to make a Kasi chili, even though we really don't know what we're doing.
I'm Team Beans.
Oh, I know. I am too. We can do both. We can do all of the above. We have multiple pieces of labor. We can manage it, but we're going to try a Kasi chili. I think we're going to try it. We're going to see how it goes and give that a shot this year to try that out. So, but the Kasi chili is the official competition chili. There's all kinds of rules with it, but it's the just meat and sauce type chili. It's tasty, but I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't understand the no beans, but I will do it for the cause, benefiting Coldwater of Lee's Summit. Hey, and if you want to have a team, you can join in. You go to Chili Fest website. It's bridgespace.us/chilifest, and this is also a great place if you have a local business, you can have a business team. You can get sponsorship that way. It's a great opportunity for team building, or if you want to bring a customer or a client out with you, have a little fun, cook some chili, hang out. And if you just want to come and purchase a spoon and taste all of the chilies,
that is
all of the
okay
salsa,
too.
all of the wings, you can do that, and you will have a darn good time.
It is. It is a blast. Doing the chili time is actually also a lot of fun. So we fully encourage everyone to come do that. You should visit bridgespace.us/chilifest for more information. We'll see you in October.
Hello and welcome to the Lee's Summit Town Hall podcast. This week we actually have a pair of segments coming on for this show. It's prepping for 3 weeks of a revolution. The youth are going to take over the podcast. We have 4 local teens who are going to come on, and they're doing a podcast for them, by them, all about their generation and what they're dealing with. A lot of it stems around mental health and youth suicide prevention. This comes out of a community task force. With me today is Carrie Gray, who's leading that task force. Carrie, welcome back. You've been here before.
I have. Thanks for having me again, Nick.
Terry Trafton, CEO, is that the right title for you, of ComCare? We'll get into what all that means later. And Elizabeth, I'm sorry, I don't remember your last name.
Okay, it's Baldwin.
Elizabeth Baldwin from Rediscover and their suicide prevention task force. Is it task force?
Program, task force, whatever you want to call it, ROCO.
Carrie, this has been going on for a little over a year now, and this youth kind of takeover has broken out of it. But before we dig into a lot of the different things, can you give us a little overview of what the task force is, why it started?
Absolutely. So the Lee Summit Youth Mental Health and Wellness Task Force was actually formed in response to the loss of several area youth to suicide. And so a group of professionals as well as parents and youth got together and formed the task force so that we could start looking at what are we going to do to stop this. You know, youth suicide is the second leading cause of death in young people, which is totally unacceptable. And so we needed to dive in and determine why this was happening, what are the risk factors, and what can we do to help prevent youth suicide.
So what's come out of it so far? I mean, look, we get together about every month, but what actually has come out, what's been provided for the community? It's a lot about resources, I know.
It is. Part of it has to do with resources and collaboration, and that's what's unique about the task force. One of our first initiatives was to put together a navigation tool for families and youth who were in crisis so that they would know where they could reach out within our community to go see a mental health professional, such as at Rediscover Mental Health, or if they're in crisis, they could reach out to First Step for Help through ComCare and access a crisis counselor who could direct them to the type of care that they needed.
I'm going to bring you in now, Terry, because I think she just referenced ComCare and the phone lines. So the company that you operate is actually, so if people call the crisis hotlines, they get your people. So what happens there? What happens if someone calls that line? Who are the people that are answering, and what service does that provide?
Yeah. So actually ComCare was formed. Rediscover is one of the founding members of ComCare, and it's a behavioral management company. And we operate firststepforhelp.com, which is our access crisis intervention line for the community. It's funded through the Department of Mental Health and the area mental health centers that work to provide services for people in the community. And Lee Summit, that is Rediscover. So we operate a 24-hour helpline, and essentially it is staffed by licensed clinical counselors, and so they are also specially trained in crisis services. And so when you call somebody, when you call the number, you get a live person. They will ask you some basic questions about what you're needing help with, which could be anywhere from, I just need help, where do I go? And we would, in this community, say Rediscover, and they have open access hours. You can walk in the door and get an assessment, and they will help triage you to the right place. Or it may be more severe than that, where I'm thinking about harming myself. I have a plan. I'm going to use these means to do that and activate it. And so then we would actually activate mobile crisis response, and a team from Rediscover would come out and assess and work with the individual. And usually law enforcement is also engaged at that point in case there needs to be transport to a more safer environment, which would be an inpatient psychiatric facility. And so that whole gamut and range could happen. We could just talk to you on the phone and help you work through something, or we could refer you on to other providers in the community. And a lot of times people may not want services, but want to know how to activate those services or strategies in the home. Parents having some stress around dealing with their kiddos.
Can a family member or friend who is concerned about somebody call that line too, or is it just the person that maybe is in crisis or sees a crisis coming?
Yeah, it's any and all above. Actually, a lot of our calls are concerned friends, family members, parents. We also get people that are struggling themselves and want to know what to do and don't really understand the system and don't really know how to access it. I think hopefully we continue to educate the community around help is here and available, and we're here to help you. And I think that the Youth Mental Health Task Force is doing a great job with helping kiddos understand. Lee Summit Cares and working with the schools and the Lee Summit schools and all the districts to really help kids and teachers understand. I was excited to hear more and more teachers now understand the resources, know to call us or know how to activate. We have a website as well that will link you to resources and link you to Rediscover's website. So help is available on the internet as well. But I think the nice thing is we have live people that are trained that can actually talk to you and help you with intervention, developing a plan for care and helping yourself.
I want to pop in, and I'm going to try to remember to do this more than once during the show. But can you guys give us websites, phone number? What are those resources that people can contact, whether it's a phone number or a website?
Okay, so like through Lee Summit Cares, if somebody wanted to join and get involved in the youth.
I think what I want is if you have a crisis or you know of a family member, what are those helplines?
Okay. You have it there.
Ours is firststepforhelp.com. It's basically just the word spelled out, firststepforhelp.com.
And we're going to put this in our show notes so that when you go to your on your podcast player or you're on the Link to Lee Summit website, you can see those there. Carrie, I know you've got it right in front of you, so I'm going to have you read the phone number.
It's 1-800-279-8188. And that's a 24-hour mental health crisis line through First Steps for Help.
Elizabeth, I'm gonna throw this one at you.
Sure.
I don't know you real well, so I'm hoping
okay.
you're gonna answer. And we seem to be talking about this more and more, and it's a topic around this community, around a lot of communities. Why is that? Why are we talking about it more now? Why is it coming into more and more conversations?
I think obviously we know that the suicide rate is raising and it continues to do so. So that's part of it. But then I think at the same time we're finally kind of getting past that stigma. It's becoming more accepted to talk about, and we realize we have to talk about it to make that change and to get people involved. And so we've kind of crossed that border. Maybe not everyone, but we're getting there. And so we're kind of, from my perspective, what we're doing, we're just now we're talking about it. What do we do to stop that rate from growing and to make sure everyone knows how to access help or how to access help for a friend? That's kind of what I've noticed from my role with the kids that I work with, as well as whether I'm in schools, we partner with churches, we do all kinds of different things, and that's what we've noticed. It's now okay to talk about it, but where do we go from there?
I'm going to come back to that being okay to talk about it and
Sure.
the stigma thing, but you mentioned that the percentage is rising,
Mm-hmm.
that there is more, and that has been my question. We've known suicide has been a problem and been around forever.
Right.
Is it really happening more now, or are we just more aware? Is it both?
I would say that it's both. It is definitely, we know it's happening more, but we're also more aware. So maybe it does seem more dramatic just because 20 years ago people didn't hear about the different suicides happening. But yes, the rate is increasing, and we know a lot of it has to do with the means. And so not only do we want to talk about the mental health and ending the stigma and how to get help, but means matter is a big part of that. And there has just been more access to lethal means, whether that's just because people don't know how to store things safely or because kids know how to get it or where to get it. So that plays a role in that as well.
What are things that we and any of you can come in on this? What are things that you're finding we're better at as far as talking about it, as far as having it there, that help us kind of get past that stigma? You keep talking about there's a stigma around suicide, there's a stigma around mental health. Are there areas that we are better at now as far as talking about it in public? Are there, or you can take the reverse, where should we be better?
I think, well, I just go back to one of the first task force meetings we had, and Nick, you were there, and you were talking about how it was not acceptable to write about it in the papers and talk about it in the media, and school districts wouldn't talk about the situations when they happened in the schools, and it was all this veil, around everything and secrecy. And that, I think, has flipped in the last couple of years since we've had some pretty significant tragedies in our community and our schools. And so it's given us an opportunity to talk about, it is okay to talk about it. Talking about it is not going to facilitate additional incidents happening. They're already happening. So people are finding out the information and figuring out how to use it as a coping strategy. And really what it boils down to is, how are we being responsive to helping kids and adults develop coping strategies that are more effective and resilient and not tragic. So I think that because the younger generation, I think, is more willing to talk about it too. When I talk to my son about some of these things, he acts like it's not a big deal to talk about it, where I'm like, oh, should we talk about, he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So not to put him on the spot, but
what are children for?
But I just think that kiddos are more willing to talk and speak up about it. And I think if you ask them, are willing. I mean, I'm so impressed with the kiddos that are working on the youth task force and how they've went out and sought information from other kids and done surveys and come back and say, no, we want more help. We want mental health classes. We want, a strategy to figure out how we can help each other in the schools. I think that's another big component of peer-to-peer support is huge. And people are willing to listen to people that have like or similar problems or situations that they've dealt with. We find that in almost every cross-section of mental health and recovery services. So, I think, Carrie, you were talking about it earlier, Elizabeth, you were talking about the PASS program, I think I just butchered the name of that program, the little QPR training, QPR. Totally got it wrong.
That's
sorry.
Okay.
You brought up at the beginning of that, and I'm going to come back to the youth because I think that's the main reason we're all here. But 25 years of being in the media, we were trained in journalism school. You don't cover suicide. You never put that in the paper. And then it was when Terry, you and I and a few other people sat down right after the suicides that we kind of went through back to back in this community, and that came out of we have to write about it, we should write about it. So that really changed the way I thought. And I'm gonna, this is a bit of a stretch because right now our nation's, we're talking about a lot about mass shootings and things like that. I listened this morning on the radio on NPR, and there was a conversation about how the media covers that, and they had someone on who was saying the media needs to stop covering and talking about the shooter, the perpetrator of the crime, because then that's giving that person attention, and then others are going to see that and it'll be a copycat. That is the exact same lesson that was taught to us about covering a suicide. And so as I was listening to that and I was prepping for our conversation today, and so is that right though? Is covering it, is talking about it, whether it's in the media, whether it's you're talking about it as a family, whether you're talking about it in the schools, is that really giving attention and giving reason for somebody to copycat?
I noticed, I think it was last summer when Kate Spade died, there were two different news outlets, and I honestly don't remember what they were, but one said, Kate Spade, purse designer, committed suicide at age whatever. The other one said Kate Spade died because of something related to mental health. Just the way it was worded was so much nicer. And you read these two articles with basically the same information, but one is acknowledging that it was just her symptoms of mental health that she was struggling with. The other had this really negative connotation. And so I think it's important that we do let people know, because that's how she died. That's just what it is. But let's be respectful about it. Let's acknowledge that we're not going to use the word committed because that has such a negative sound to it. It sounds like she did a crime. She was just struggling. That was a symptom of her depression or what other mental health she was struggling with. And so I think that form of reporting is definitely needed. We need to acknowledge that it's happening so people are aware. But then being respectful how we do it, also not giving too much detail, just because, again, it comes down to the respect of that person, their family, how they have to go through things as well.
What about the word suicide? Because you just talked about the two different headlines.
Right.
One used the word, one didn't. But you talked about, saying death by suicide. I think, Terry, when you were on with that group, one of them, and I can't remember which member of that group was, but counselor, so a certified person, not a dummy like me, but said that it was important to say death by, to have a cause, just like you would any other death. I guess my question is more around language and what language should we be using so that we keep these conversations in the public eye and it's erasing that stigma.
Well, I think people need to better understand, and I think that we're making progress in this area, that we all have mental health and we have physical health. And I really like the reference going back to Kate Spade, because I saw something similar with Robin Williams, where they said that he had, one advertisement was that he had committed suicide and said exactly how he did it, whereas that we need to shift our perception and understand that a person who dies by suicide, how they phrased it in Robin Williams' situation was that he lost his struggle with intense emotional pain. Mm-hmm. And I learned that through a seminar with Kevin Hines, who has a story in a documentary about he survived a jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. And what really struck with me was that the minute his heels left the guardrail, he regretted what he had done. And I think that based on what he's saying, people don't want to die. They just don't want to suffer anymore. And I think that when people are given permission to talk about things like depression, anxiety, that it helps them to know that they're not alone and to be able to connect with other people. Years ago, if somebody had a mental illness, the thought that would come to mind was, this person's crazy. Well, that's not the case. There's things going on with them on a mental health level that are causing some shifts in perspectives, feelings, and to tell someone who is dealing, for example, with depression that they just need to suck it up and try harder is not helpful. It's not empathetic. And that's why we want to reduce that stigma so that people can go and reach out and get the help that will help them, because we know that treatments are very effective.
I think those are all great points. I think changing the language to a more generative perspective and to where we're helping people build resources and skills to cope with the problems of toxic stress in our community and our society, just general stress. It doesn't have to be toxic, and then trauma that people deal with on a regular basis in various situations. And so how do we help people realize that, suicide is not the answer? That's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And so how do we help people realize that there are coping strategies, that this can be better? The depression can alleviate. The anxiety can alleviate. And so what are some things that we can do around that? How can we build those skills, resilient skills? And how do we talk to people about that? And so it's really changing the language about how we talk about suicide and the struggle of mental health issues and how it impacts all of our lives and all aspects of our lives, including our physical health. I mean, just about every physical ailment can also be complicated by the fact that, dealing with cancer, usually people become depressed through that process because it's such a, horrible stress on your life. So just recognizing those things together and being able to help people realize and understand what that can do to help them.
Let's shift gears just a little bit, and let's kind of transition that into talking about our youth, talking about kids and how how we can help them. Terry, you just said earlier that it seems like they are more willing to do it than maybe our generations were. I can tell you, I don't remember ever having a conversation about it, except for maybe when there was a special episode of whatever TV show, but I don't remember having those conversations, and maybe we didn't know better then. I don't know, but you did talk about how they seem more willing and more able. So, Carrie, there are youth members of this community task force. There is a youth advisory board through Lee Summit Cares. Mm-hmm. There are several other, I've now found several other youth advisory boards in different programs throughout the community. But so tell us a little bit about how you, through this group, how you're trying to not only engage but really give them a voice.
Well, one of the first projects that we facilitated when we pulled the task force together was to work with the youth to create a survey to better understand the good and the bad of growing up in today's world. And so through that, we surveyed almost 500 kids from different school districts in the metropolitan area. And we got a better perspective and insight into what it is like to be a teenager. And some of the things that we learned from that survey and are continuing to process through, and part of the reason why we created the podcast, is that kids, they need to be heard. They have a lot of wisdom. Oftentimes, we as adults step back and look at a situation and think we know how to fix that situation, when the reality is that we need to, as we say, shut up and listen.
Actually, as they told us.
To say. They did. They basically told us that the adults need to do less talking and more listening. And that's a very difficult thing to do, because when you truly are listening to another person, you have to work really hard. They might say things that make you feel uncomfortable. Your perspective might be a little bit different. You might feel like you have to fix that situation. But truly listening is something that we as an adult population, if you will, need to work on. Things that the kids were sharing with us was that many of them were getting 4 hours of sleep at night, that they were sacrificing that restorative sleep in order to be involved in extracurricular activities, school activities, work activities. And the reality is there's only so much time in the day. And when a person is not getting the restorative sleep that they need, as Terry said, our mental health and physical health are related, and so that starts to cause problems with their immune system. If someone's already struggling a bit with depression, it could cause that to spiral. And so we're becoming more aware of some of those challenges, and that's just one that we learned. There were many.
We did several interviews, Carrie, you and I. We went to some of the youth in their classrooms, at schools. We did a couple of panels where we asked some questions in front of some audiences, and it was really hard sometimes not to try to give them advice in there, because we heard them open up and tell some things, and just as an adult, as a parent, you want to go, oh, but if you did this, or look at it this way, and it was really hard just to kind of, oh no, we're gonna let them talk. I don't know if you had that same reaction as you sit there, but
absolutely, and I think that's a nurturing role, as an adult, especially as a parent. I have 4 kids, and so when they come home and they're struggling with something, my natural tendency is to want to get rid of their pain and help fix it, or even possibly, if I'm not thinking clearly, go in and fix it for them. But the lesson, or what we learned, the message that we got consistently across these groups was, back off. Just listen to me. Let me vent. Ask me questions. I'll figure it out. If I need your help, there are times when I need your help, I'll let you know. But just be a guide, be more of a consultant to me, especially as I'm growing older and getting ready to leave the house. I need to learn how to handle these different situations in a place where it's, kind of safe while I'm still at home.
I think it's important, just hearing all of this, it's important, but it's very hard to remember that the only expert on somebody is that person. And that's true even, when we're working with teenagers or younger than teenagers. They're the ones that actually know how they're feeling and what they need. We just don't always let them express that. And I think you brought up a great point, just kind of, laying low and just being there to listen and hear them out. And a lot of the times, if you let them do that, they might solve their problems as they talk to you. So,
what are you seeing, Elizabeth, when you go out with and I don't know if you're going into schools or if these programs are coming to you, and I'm going to assume that you're all of the above.
Correct.
So I guess what are you seeing as far as, I'm going to start with needs that maybe a community like ours could offer, or resources that a community like this could offer for teens as they try to find a way to talk about these problems, to deal with these kinds of issues. What can we do better? What can we provide as a community? Or are there things that we are providing that people don't know about that we need to just get that word out there?
Mm-hmm. I think kids are just growing up with a different set of issues than before, and maybe issues is the wrong word, but it's almost as if they never get a break. They're at school with incredibly high expectations there, and then they go home, and if they're struggling with bullies, if they're struggling with something else, they're always connected with those phones. And so I think first recognizing that it's different than past generations going to school. And one thing that, in a dream world, if I won the lottery and could do something, I would love to just have a huge drop-in center for youth. I think while they at times do need the adults and will go to them, they learn so much from each other and they get so much support from each other. And obviously they have friendships. They're doing activities at school where they can make those connections. But if we had a drop-in center that was ran or staffed by people who are experienced, have that clinical background that can assist if need be, but otherwise just give them a safe place to be. I know there are some places like that, but I think if we can make one more accessible, partner with schools, partner with places like Rediscover, ComCare, whatever it may be, just so there are more options that everyone can access. That would be, I could see that going really well if we found lots of money all of a sudden.
So let's shift now in, Carrie. So we had 4 youth that stepped forward out of this thing. We did not use their last name so that they could have some semblance of anonymity in the community. But Hudson, Riley, Mallory, and Olivia are the 4 youth that decided to participate. Now, I'll chime in later, but I'm curious, Carrie, because we haven't talked too much. What were some things that stood out to you as they formulated their own plan? I mean, I just pushed buttons, so they had their own thoughts on what to talk about and how to talk about it. Kind of what caught you?
Well, I guess part of me was, and I don't know that I should have been surprised by this, but each of the kids had struggled at some point and another. And so we know ourselves in going through middle school and high school that that's not an easy process, but I was impressed with the willingness of each of them to share, to be vulnerable and talk about those struggles and things that they were doing to help themselves to overcome them.
I would not have said, at their age, the things that they said to each other. And these 4 are not all close, tight friends. They go to different schools.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them know each other, but most don't. So I would not have been that open.
Yeah. That surprised me too. And I thought, wow, how nice for this generation, to be able to be more open and talk about that. And they want to talk about that. They want to relate to other people. Certainly they talked about social media. I didn't hear anything positive, with regards to the social media piece, but they also were aware of things that they could do that would help their mental health with social media, such as taking breaks from it, not having that phone in their room, but it's hard to set those personal boundaries.
I feel like as a parent, and I'm gonna sweeping judgment here, all of us, that seems to be the biggest worry and fear as parents are the handheld devices and the social media and their access to whatever unknowns are out there, right? But I was a little taken by, I think, they seemed a lot more responsible as a generation and aware of the access and the portals that social media gave. And that was a very nice surprise to me.
It was, and they knew how to, as you're saying, set the privacy settings. Many of them, I think all of them who had social media were only inviting people in who they knew personally. And so they were pretty educated and equipped in how to navigate through some of those different things and which ones were not good and that they should stay away from.
Terry, you have your son is leaving high school and going to college. Do you have the same level of trepidation and worry at that with that age?
I think you always do. What I do is I caution other parents because I think the age continues to titrate down as to when kids are getting those devices, and I think I have some nieces and nephews, and they're they're going into middle school age, and I know that it is very popular, and I can remember my son's pleas, and I'm the only kid in the class that doesn't have this phone, and I need this phone, and there's so much peer pressure, and even the schools are using the devices in education, and so it's almost like you need to teach good boundaries around it because it's they almost have to have them at some point. But what level of access? I do like the fact that there are apps now coming out where you can kind of control the access to apps and different devices and how much time kiddos can be on those devices. But I think teaching it sounds like good social media hygiene almost, It's like, setting parameters, limits. I know that you talked about sleep deprivation, and I know kids that were up in the middle of the night, my son getting chats and stories from kids. I'm like, what are they doing up at 3 a.m. snapping stories to you? It's just, they need to be sleeping. Mm-hmm. And so how do you teach that good use of the devices? Because they're not going away, right? And they continue to be kind of almost embedded in our hands, so in all areas, including adults. So
I have trouble scolding my own son. Luckily, he's sitting right behind Carrie right now, holding my device and two of his. But I also sit here at this table in this conversation. I have a tablet, I have a computer, I have cameras around, so I have a little trouble getting all self-righteous and scolding because they are tools and there are things. Elizabeth, I'm gonna turn to you a little bit here, and what are you talking about when you go out and you're talking to youth? How are you talking to them about technology and that giant role that it plays in all our lives, let alone theirs?
Goes one of two ways, and usually we try to hit on both, but a lot of the conversation is either about self-care and is the way you're using technology fitting into your self-care plan, and if it's not, what do we need to do? And then as well as boundaries. A lot of the kids I work with struggle with setting boundaries with friendships, relationships, even boundaries for themselves. And so then, okay, well, if we're staying up till 3 a.m, do we need to set a boundary for ourselves? Or if this person is consistently messaging you on Instagram and it's hateful, do we need to set a boundary with this person? And then that trickles over into their day-to-day life. So I see a positive that way. However, these kids have showed me some really neat apps. One I can think of the top of my head, it's called Woebot, WOEBOT. And it's a little robot that talks to you, kind of. You can text it whatever you want, like, hey, I'm really struggling with whatever today. And then there's a response. It was created by a couple therapists, and it's pretty heavily based in DBT. And so I'm like, well, that's a great way to use your phone if you're struggling someday. And I've seen positives that way. So I think, like someone said earlier, they're not going away. So let's see how we can get the most use out of them and see them as tools rather than these kind of hindrances.
It was really interesting. And Carrie, you sat in on the sessions with me where the youth did that, recorded their podcast, and it was really interesting to me. And you'll hear over the next few weeks, you're going to hear one of them tell this story a couple of times. She brings it up about how there are times when the worlds between their social media relationships and their real life at school or whatever blend. Mm-hmm. And then she would also tell stories about how she had some people that they were social media friends, very close, but when it came to going to school or wherever, they rarely ever talked.
Right.
They didn't run in the same circles. But online, if that is saying online, is that still dating us a little bit? I feel like online's the old person way of saying on social media. But through social media, they were close, and that. And I don't know if that's just a generational thing, but it was really hard for me to figure out how to separate those two things.
No, you go ahead, Carrie.
Well, I was just thinking about the anonymity. You feel a little bit of, a distance protection between that phone screen, that computer tablet screen, and the person you're actually communicating with. For example, when I go in and I work with students on bullying prevention, and I'll ask them, why will people say things online that they would never in a million years say to someone's face? And the number one thing they say is because you can't see their reaction. And so I think adolescence obviously is a difficult time as you're trying to figure out who you are, what your identity is outside of your parents, where your future goals are, things like that. And so it might provide what is interpreted as a safe place to perhaps express feelings, thoughts, and ideas that someone might be less comfortable doing in more of a public setting. And I don't know if that's neither good or bad. It just is.
Yeah, I don't think I had a reaction as good or bad on it. It was just I almost could not relate. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say that word because this group is hoping that they can spin this off into their own podcast. They've even come up with a title. They want to call it I Can Relate. So hopefully we're going to find out in the next few months if they're going to be able to do that. They want to spin that off and maybe once or twice a month have a show and talk to other of their peers and share their stories. And I think this is how we're going to wrap it up a little bit. I think that is what the three of you and everyone that is in your profession is really trying to do, is that more people talking about it and more people sharing stories. Is that our biggest key, is that we've got to open up, we've got to share these stories and talk?
And
absolutely. Yeah. And listen. Open up and listen. Yes.
Listen more.
Exactly. And it would be neat what I like about it is that the youth are creating the topics and talking about what they want to talk about. But it might also be interesting if people, say adults are wanting to learn to listen a little bit better, what do they need to hear? What questions do the adults have of these youth, and so that they can get a greater perspective on some things.
Well, that's going to wrap it up, because this next segment, we're going to take a little break, and the next segment is actually going to be two members of that group, Riley and Olivia, and they sat down with me a little bit to preview what they're going to talk about and what we're going to hear from them. I encourage everybody to listen to the podcast the next 3 weeks. Shut up and listen, right, Carrie? Shut up and listen. Hear what some of that generation has to say and how they are working through things, and it will be entertaining. It will be eye-opening, and I think also, I said this a little bit when they were here, Carrie, I think also it will make you feel really good, because we have met, and I know you're in it, so you meet a lot more than I do, but we've met a lot of youth through these processes, and they make you feel good about the future, about the next generation, and how they're going to handle things. So one more time, who wants the honors of, let's do the website and the phone number one more time.
1-888-279-8188, firststepforhelp.com.
Terry, Carrie, Elizabeth, thank you guys. We're going to take a little break, and we'll be back with Riley and Olivia.
Thank you.
Well, today we are joined with two of our four youth who are going to take over the Lee Summit Town Hall podcast for the next 3 weeks. I've got Riley and Olivia with me. Who are we missing? Who are the two we're missing?
Hudson and Mallory, right?
Yes.
You guys decided that you wanted to have your own voice. You wanted to talk about your topics for people like you, for other youth. Why? Why do you want to speak?
You want to go first? You want me to?
I'll go first. As teenagers nowadays, we have more of a voice than you would have 10 years ago because of social media and everything else around in the world, and how many topics nowadays revolve around us, but we get lost in the crowd, I would say. And so I think it's important for real life teenagers you actually hear us speaking like our truth on a platform for us.
What do you mean when you say we get lost in the crowd? What does that mean?
Well, nowadays, since everyone does have access to get their voice out there, I feel like it's like blended almost. Everyone's kind of conforming to one mindset just to fit in, and they talk about a lot of subjects that are mainstream and not some that are really hard to talk about sometimes. Do
you think that, and Riley, I'll have you chip in if you agree here,
okay.
But do you think that that's a filter that people are filtering because they say what they think people want to hear? Is that kind of where you're going?
100%.
It depends on the person. I feel like we here don't, just because, you know what, judge me or not, I'm just going to speak what I believe and my opinion on this, whatever. But there is a lot of people that will say it depends on the situation too, but like, if you're on social media or something, generally I do not feel like people would do that. Speak their mind.
Is social media different? Talking on social media, is that different than talking in person? Different than talking on the phone? Do you still talk on the phone?
Sometimes. It depends.
Yeah. So I mean, are there? Because you just brought that up with social media. So, but I mean, is talking in person different than talking? Are there different filters used?
I think so.
I mean, there has to be. If I'm talking to you via social media, it's not the same as us talking face to face. If we're talking over social media, there's a lot more anonymity? No. I cannot speak, but
anonymity is your word.
Thank you.
Perfect.
I need a bell. I'm gonna get ring a little bell
yes.
every once in a while.
Dictionary of the day.
Big words of the day.
Ding.
Well, when you're on social media, I mean, so you're connected with lots of your friends, lots of your peers that way. Is it really anonymous? Do you feel anonymous because you can't see them?
I feel like it's not that you're anonymous. It's like you're a different person on social media, I almost feel like. In real life, if I'm talking to someone about a topic, I feel like it's more of a conversation. It's flowing more. I get to hear their point of view, and I feel like they see mine, and it's less of an argument. But if you're on social media and you're talking to someone on the opposing side, I feel like it's more argumentative for some reason.
I used to have social media in middle school, but I hated it. Like, I might get one now just because I feel like I've matured a little bit more, but I didn't like it then because I feel like people liked the idea of me, but not actually me as a person. Because all the people who wanted to follow me, I never even, talked to. So what's the point of having them follow me if we don't actually know each other? And that's kind of why I got... People are a lot different, like what you said, different people on social media, because people like popular kids would want to follow me. I'm like, you used to pick it on me in 6th grade. Why do you want to follow me on Instagram?
And they only see the highlights of your life.
Yeah,
because I don't post on Instagram when I'm upset.
No one's having a bad day. Just hashtag popcorn, Ben and Jerry's, and sweatpants. But
well, so let's take this now to the podcast. So you guys for the next 3 weeks are going to take over my podcast on Fridays, which is really cool. But what do you think you can do with this? How do you think you can speak differently with this to people your own age? Why this? Why are you doing this? What do you think you can do that's different?
I think we're going to be the voice of the average teen and the struggles that we go through in every day in our lives. Kind of just getting it out there, that just getting our voices out there, I feel like is really important, because not everyone knows exactly what it's like, and no one will ever know exactly what it's like because we're all different. But I feel like if we talk about, if we just be ourselves on this and talk openly with one another, it's going to just be a relief to others, especially our age.
To counter that a little bit, you said the average teen, but I feel like on here we usually have Mallory and Hudson, but that's 4 very different people on here. And I guess the big thing is I'm hoping that some of the listeners that hopefully listen to us, fingers crossed, kind of relate to at least one of us, because, or maybe they find different things about each one of us that are like, oh, I can relate to that, because there's a lot of times where people feel like they're unrelatable in a way.
To like know they're not alone.
Yeah.
Like, to see us like being able to be in a room, 4 very different people talking about like things that happen.
Like
being honest.
you'll see early on that we vary on opinions, but we still don't we can disagree on things and not get along, kind of.
We can find common ground.
Common ground, yes. But, like, we're all 4 very different people, so we're not all gonna, like, say the same thing about certain issues. So I feel like hopefully people will find things that they're like, oh, this person's funny because, or this person I can relate to a little bit. Like, oh, I didn't know this person had the same interest as me or something, just because there are a lot of people, even in just our school, that we don't really know. And that's just, hey, I'm a voice in our community that hopefully you find something with, I guess.
Yeah.
What are some topics that you feel are important to get out? I guess I'm still wanting to learn more about why you guys came up with this idea and what you think is important to. I don't know if pass on is the right phrase, but pass on to your peers, share with your peers. What topics are important? What should we? And I'm gonna say we. I'm not gonna include me in that because I'm an old fart. What should you, as your group of peers, people your generation, what things should you be sharing? What topics should you be addressing? What are you hoping to talk about?
I think, hopefully, I feel like we've already started that a little bit, but what we hope, or me particularly hope that we get out, is just kind of what our life is day to day. And I feel like a lot of teens get that, but like I said earlier, we are 4 very different people, so maybe like 4 different, like, how days go, kind of, that people find that, kind of. I don't know if that made sense, but, like...
How our lives vary.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know some adults are listening, but it's more teens that we're trying to reach out to, of like, hey, you know, we share the same struggles, and this is just kind of letting us vent, and then them sharing their ideas, hopefully, of, like, what they think we should talk about, and just kind of talking about what needs fixed in our community, or what things we agree on, or what we like about our community.
Tackling stigmas.
That's a big one right there, you know.
Because we're going to talk about mental health and how it's very prominent now, especially kids our age, in the community even. So I feel like that's really important to get out there, because not everyone wants to talk about, like, the whole mental health issue.
You say it's prominent. What do you mean? What's prominent?
I think that like majority of kids our age suffer from some sort of like depression, anxiety, eating disorders. It's a wide like thing, because it's not just, oh, I always feel sad. So, you know, there's the eating disorders. You have depression, which are 2 very different things, but still kind of the same. I don't know how that makes any sense, but
well, okay, but then let's go on to, you also are going to talk about technology and the role that plays in your everyday life. You're going to talk about, you mentioned this earlier, Riley, that you're going to talk about what a normal day in the life for you are.
Simply put, just what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Technology. I mean, like, that's probably the biggest thing. If you go around to my generation and say, what do you think of us kids? We probably are going to bring up the phone.
Definitely.
The iPhone, the Android, whatever. We're going to bring that up first,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we as parents say that's our biggest fear, are we right? Is that the thing that we should be worried about? Do you think that's the topic?
Like, yes and no, you should be scared, but also like
Live in fear.
live in fear. But it's a good tool, but it's also a burden almost. And yeah, we will talk about that and about how it is good and bad.
I feel like with technology too, some people aren't necessarily, geez, I need to speak, aren't scared of like technology itself, but the change technology brings with it. And I feel like that if you ask a lot of adults, they'll maybe not admit it, some will, but like if they had asked what their technology was like, they'd say, oh, yeah, the cord phone. Stranger Things, for example, man. Like, that's just what I know. And now they see us on our phones and stuff like that, and we have more technology like, in our hands than they did to fly the first rocket to the moon. That's kind of crazy. And
No, it is crazy.
I'm not that old.
And so the change technology brings with it is a big impact to what people could be afraid of, but also a big move forward in the path of, forget what the actual thing I was going to say, but like the march of change progressing through time. That's a big thing with technology itself.
Yeah.
Even from 5 years ago, like this iPhone, I have an iPhone 8 compared to like the iPhone 5. It's crazy.
Drastically different.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think it's technology is something that's always going to be in our future. It's something that's going to shape us. And I feel like it's really important to talk about that now. Like, just technology in general and how it impacts the world, and just social media on our mental health and connecting us with others. So I feel like that's a really broad topic that we'll talk about.
I have a love-hate relationship with social media.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, that's understandable.
For my business work that I do, it is imperative that I use social media. It's how I spread the word and brand things. I will tell you, I have also seen its incredible power to communicate. I am from the Joplin, Missouri area. In 2011, there was a giant tornado
Yeah.
that went through there. And I didn't live in town then, but much of my family and friends did. And there was no phone service for weeks
Yeah.
after that. And the way people communicated was Facebook.
Yeah.
And Facebook Messenger. And that's how they found out where people were, what they were doing, how we got food and money and water and things to them. So I have seen that, but then I am also a parent.
Yep.
And I read the horror stories I see, and I hear your generation talk about things that I don't understand because I'm old.
Visco.
So can you relate to that? Yeah, you're making fun of me for a conversation we had earlier in the show before we started recording. But so do you look at social media and technology? Do you look at that with a similar lens, and that there are things you love about it and things you fear about it?
I feel like the biggest misconception is that all teenagers love social media and that we always want to be on it from a parent's point of view. But whenever we're among each other, we know that there's hardships that come with it, and that it's not always butterflies and rainbows, that there's cyberbullying and just the need to fit in. And it's a struggle.
Is the need to fit in through those social media and texting, is that need to fit in the same as the need to fit in that we can all relate when we're talking about school and school groups and peer groups? Is that the same kind of thing?
Like how we fit in? Is that what you're trying to say? Or
That desire to fit in, is it
Yeah.
the same?
I'm not 100% sure on that, because with school you see like how people click together, and I know they're like, there's no cliques in high school. There are cliques in high school.
Yeah, there
Catch
is
up.
100%. It's not the jocks and the stoners anymore. It's weird.
There's still a nerd clique though. Be real. But social media trying to fit in, I feel like, is more people trying to connect with other people like them. So it's more finding who you fit with online. My school is kind of just putting yourself where you feel like you fit. And like school's more of a puzzle, I feel like, where you have to try and find your piece in it all. In social media, you get to put your place in the puzzle, saying I belong here, which is a good and a bad thing. School, it's much harder to fit in, I feel like, than if you are on social media, because you can just block someone. You can talk to somebody, block somebody, and walk away if you really wanted to. But with school, you can just walk away, and that's kind of where the difference is.
Do you agree with that, Olivia? That social media is more you can pick your spot?
Yes and no. Like, I feel like for sure you can find your group of people. I've met so many people through social media that have I've connected with, become close with, who have helped me with things. But whenever it comes locally, I feel like people from my school, their popularity sometimes does come from their social media followers.
Yeah.
But there's also this really nice girl named Taylor, and at school, she is so nice, and but she's not like what you would consider the popular girl. for some reason, which is weird because she's a very nice girl and very funny. But on YouTube, she has over 100,000 subscribers. And you just would never know. And it's just so interesting to me how, you know, on the internet, someone would be like, oh my God, she's like the most popular girl in school, but she's just normal, which I think is good. But then also we glorify people at my school who may not always be the best people like Taylor is.
Yeah. That's...
I'm gonna do a little bit and tell you you're gonna find that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So it's a good lesson to learn now. I know you guys have talked about hoping to maybe spin this off into your own kind of show. You even have a title.
Yes.
I can relate. I know that's a driving kind of theme behind things is you want to show that everyone, whether no matter their differences, they can relate and stories can be similar.
Yeah.
So how will that work? What do you want a future your own podcast, your own show? How do you want that to work? How do you want people to interact with you?
Do you mind if I go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Like you said, stories is a big part of people, and I hope futurely, that's not a word, but in the future.
I'm going to when you guys are done, we're going to have a whole other show. We're going to talk about words.
Yes.
Okay, yes. I'm all down because I can't even speak today. Blah. So in the future, I hope that we can get the chance to share our own stories. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but I feel like each person has their own little testimony or like story about different parts of their life, and it doesn't have to be one big story, but it can be like different things of how they've shaped who you are, because you're not just one story. You're not like, I guess it's like a book. Every person's got a different chapter to them that makes them who they are in the big book. So hopefully we can share our stories, but I'd be really interested in seeing other people who've listened in and say, hey, I've got a story to share too. So it's become a big community of sharing their stories to help people relate to each other on that way and help us grow stronger as individuals in that way, aspect.
100%. I hope that people feel like it's a safe space to share their stories and to know they're not alone. And I think it'd be interesting to have people from the community our age come in and talk with us and have a sit-down conversation with them. Because, yeah, us four, we're all different. We all have our own stories, but then bringing in an outside person to share their story. And I hope people can talk to us and maybe say topics that they want us to bring up. I hope that we can find a way to get that through, and I hope people feel like secure enough to entrust us to talk about those topics.
Yeah, I really hope that we can just be moderators for a bigger conversation, kind of. You know, I'll just be here for the comic relief and to just interview like you're doing, because everybody knows we need a little comic relief, and like just that's what I'm here for, hopefully, is just to break up the conversation and then ask different conversations or start new conversations that can just this is kind of like the idea board or the brainstorm for a bigger conversation starter, I feel like.
Well, I'm gonna jump in and just say you do more than offer comic relief, Riley.
Agreed.
You guys have already recorded the next 3 episodes. I haven't let you hear them yet. I just pushed the buttons and recorded, but I haven't let you hear them yet.
I'm really
so
embarrassed.
you do more than just the comic relief, Riley. You guys did a fantastic job. I'm excited to put these out there and let people hear what you have to say. I've said this before several times. Like everyone else, I love making jokes and making fun of the next generation, and y'all have it easy and all those kind of things. But I want to say this too. I have met through this community task force. I have met a lot of youth, a lot of people your age, and I will tell you this: I'm ready to give you the keys. You can have the keys to the world. You guys are smart.
Sometimes.
You have a mission. You want to change the world. You're attentive to things. That's a good thing. So I'm still going to make fun of you because that's my right.
Yes.
But you guys have done a good job, and so I'm excited for this. Thank you for doing the show, and we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Thank you, guys. You have been listening to Lee Summit Town Hall, a Link to Lee Summit podcast with hosts Nick Parker and Jason Norberry. A proud member of the Fredcast Network, you can subscribe to this podcast on most of your favorite podcast apps and catch us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for all the news, analysis, and conversations on the Lee's Summit community. Connect with us on Facebook at Link to Lee's Summit or on Twitter at LS Town Hall.